Let's take a look at other cases of complex zeros, complex roots, complex solution. Just three names. They are the same thing depending on the textbook you use. All right, so I want to do a fourth degree polynomial and then we try to do a quadratic formula. All right, so f of x equals to x to the fourth plus 2x squared plus 1. This one I would just say suppose you are doing a second degree. So let's do that. So suppose you are doing a second degree. So let's say x squared plus x, 2x plus 1. We reduce this by 2. So second degree. And then how do we factor that? I use diamond method. So this one diamond method, I multiply the leading coefficient and the constant. 1 times 1 is equals to 1. And then the coefficient of the first degree is 2. So we have to figure out two numbers. The product is 1, the sum is 2, which is 1 and 1. And then you have x plus 1, and then you have x plus 1, right? Okay, now let's put this to a fourth degree. So for fourth degree, so that one you have x to the fourth plus 2x squared and then plus 1. Okay, so the way we do this is we change the x plus 1 to a x squared plus 1. And then this is a x squared plus 1. So we need to factor this. So how about this? Factor completely. And then find the zeros. Did we factor completely? The answer is not yet. Okay, so this one x squared plus 1 times x squared plus 1. So when you multiply, you have what? You have x squared plus x to the fourth. X squared times square, x to the fourth, and then plus x squared, 1 times x squared, and then 1 times 1, and then you will just get this back. Okay, now the next thing is how do we factor completely? So again, we have f of x equals to x to the fourth plus 2x squared plus 1. We did the work. We do one step of factor. We have x squared plus 1 times x squared plus 1, and then we set that equals to 0 to find all the real zeros and complex zeros. But this is not factored completely yet. So to factor, okay, this one we don't really need to keep mentioning the word factor. We have one factor times another factor equals to 0, and then we apply the zero product property. We have x squared plus 1 equals to 0, and then the other factor, x squared plus 1 equals to 0. And then this one here is a little secret technique. So you have x plus the square root of -1, and then x plus the square root of -1, that is equals to 0. Okay, here, take a look. X times x, you have the x squared, right? So this one you have this time, you have x times that, so that is is always a plus and a minus. Okay, so you have x times x, x squared, so x times that, you have a minus, and then you have a plus, they are cancelled. When you have this times that, the plus times a minus, you have a positive square root of -1 minus negative square root of -1. Okay, so plus and minus, that gives you a -1, and then square root times square root, you simply remove the square root, so you get your 1 back. The 1 is this one, the positive one right over there. All right. And then the square root of -1 is what? The square root of -1 is equals to I. So basically you have x plus I, and then times x minus I equals to 0. So this one you have x equals to -I and positive I, right? So that one is just x plus I, and then x minus I equals to 0. So you have x equals to -I and then a positive I. So these two solutions and these two solutions. And then as you can see, I is a repeated root. -I is also a repeated root. So these factors, so the f of x equals to x to the fourth plus 2x squared plus 1 can be factored into x plus I times x minus I. We have one more pairs of that, x plus I, and then x minus I. So this is factor completely. Factor completely. And then we have 4 complex zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. I and I, this is a repeated factor, repeated one time, minus I, repeated factor, repeated one time. Okay? Okay, what happened when you see this? Let's use a different color. So how about you have g of x equals to x squared minus 3x plus 10. How do you find the complex solution? So this one cannot be factored, then you have to use what? Then you have to use quadratic formulas. So quadratic formula, this is a quadratic function. Quadratic means the highest power is 2. So you have a equals to 1, b equals to -3, c is equals to 10. And then the quadratic formula is x equals to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And then you have -b plus or minus the square root of b squared, -3 squared, plus, minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a, 2 times 1, -3, you have a 3 plus or minus. This one you have what? You have a -3 times -3, so you have a 9 minus 40, right? 9, this is a 9 minus 40. 9 minus 40 is -31. So you have a square root of -31 and then divided by 2. So that means you have 3 over 2 plus the square root of -31, square root of -1 is just a I, then you have a square root of 31I divided by 2 and then I, and then you also have 3 over 2 minus square root of 31 over 2i. So these are the two complex zeros. So complex zeros. X equals to this. And then how about the factor? So this one factor completely, then you have x and then you have an x, right? You have x equals to this, and then x equals to this, and then you have a plus and a minus. So you have a plus you have x equals to those. Okay, you set that equals to 0, and then you have x equals to these two. You have x equals to this, and then x equals to this. When you put that back, so here is something that you have to work out. It might be a lot. So let's say just for example, so let's say x equals to 2 and then x equals to 3. So when you put this back, you have x minus 2 and then x minus 3, right? Because when you set that equals to 0, you have to add 2 and 3 on each side. So if you have x plus 4, then this becomes a minus. All right. So since this one you have x equals to that, and then when you put that into the parentheses, so this you have a minus. So 3 over 2 plus square root of 31 over 2i, and then you have a minus 3 over 2 minus square root of 31 over 2i. So that one is factor completely. You set that equals to 0, and then you move this term to the other side, that gives you a plus. You move this term to the other side, that gives you a plus, and then the plus, and the minus. You just do the job. Okay? Alright, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed the way I teach math, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more content. As always, I will meet you all in the next video. Take care.